Hey, Ms. Colbert. Let me start where you started, cybersecurity. Obviously, the discovery of the numerous breaches have been the subject of a number of hearings in this committee. We found out not too long ago that the Inspector General, Patrick McFarland, is going to retire. I hate to see that, but I know that one of the things that OPM has undertaken is a major IT modernization project designed to replace existing systems, which I think is absolutely necessary. But Mr. McFarland was very critical of the effort. It cost about $100 million. His quote, "It's entirely inadequate and introduces a very high risk of project failure." Can you just kind of comment on, I guess, his evaluation of that modernization effort and what the plans are to address that situation?
Sure. Thank you, Senator.
Is your button on?
I'm sorry, sir. Addressing cybersecurity and modernizing OPM's IT systems so they're appropriate for the evolving threat environment we face today is a critical priority. It's work that is important. It needs to be done carefully, and we are continuing to take all the input we can on how to do that well. We've had an ongoing dialogue since I arrived at OPM. I, in fact, met with the Inspector General my first day there to talk about his concerns, to understand them, and to figure out how to address them. We've also been in the process of looking again at the modernization plan in light of some of the changes. We've looked at it again post the breach because we needed to understand what we learned from that context and how to incorporate it. We're going to be looking at it again in the context of the recent decision to stand up the NBIB and have the Department of Defense play the role they're playing in the IT support for that organization. So we are continuing to work that plan. We are continuing to have an ongoing dialogue with the Inspector General about it. And we are committed, and I'm committed, if confirmed, to continue to make sure that we have a thoughtful plan. We have a plan that will deliver results, and we'll have a plan that will deliver security, and that will be a smart use of the taxpayers' dollars.
I'll go on the record right now. I hope after the retirement of Mr. McFarland, this administration nominates somebody immediately to replace him, because the IG is an extremely important position. When you see these breaches and this massive amount of data, whether it's in the private sector or within OPM, I'm always kind of scratching my head going, what are people going to be using with this information? I think it's widely believed that this breach was really not really about trying to utilize the personal information for criminal activity, but as a breach from a nation state really having to do with national security. One of the things we would like to do, certainly I'd like to be briefed by the National Counterintelligence and Security Center. I would just ask you to help facilitate that type of briefing. Is that something you're willing to basically go on record with?
I'd be very happy to facilitate the briefing. We've worked closely with that group throughout the process of responding to the breach and figuring out how to respond to it most effectively. They're a key partner of ours, and I'd be happy to work with them to get you and this committee any input from them that you need.
A recent ruling by the Federal Labor Relations Authority basically took away the authority of agency heads to really set policies that relates to personal email use and Facebook use on agency computers. I think you disagree with that. Can you kind of speak to that issue?
As the world of cybersecurity is changing, as we recognize the nature of these threats, we all need to change the way we interact, the way we use systems at work and at home. What we've done at OPM, and I think what's important for every agency to do, is to recognize what needs to change in the way they operate, what needs to change in the way their employees operate to make sure systems are secure. At OPM, for example, I cannot access my personal Gmail account from my OPM computer. That's the way a lot of threats come in. There have been new guidelines about how to use personal devices to access the network. I believe it's important to put those processes into place. We need to change the way we act in the face of this threat, and we need to take actions, simple actions like that can make an enormous difference.
But again, I think I agree with you. That should really be left up to the administration, not necessarily in negotiation with the union.
We've had lots of discussions with many folks, including the unions, at the National Labor Management Council coming out of the breaches. They too share the concern about protecting the information of their members, protecting the information of the government, and I know we can work with them to make the kind of progress we need to make here.
When we met, one of the issues I raised, because I was visited by representatives of the United Way, about OPM's consolidation of the combined federal campaign. I know you have a lot of experience with the United Way from your private sector. Can you just speak to the, first of all, why we're combining that, and again, basically make a commitment to meet with representatives of the United Way and address their concerns?
Senator, thank you for raising this earlier and now. The work in the combined federal campaign is designed to centralize the administration of that effort, but to ensure, as it always has been, that local donations that individuals choose from across the country to send to local charities go to those local charities. It also preserves a critical role for our philanthropic partners, including the United Way, in working on those local campaigns. They're key to get people excited about donating. They're key to about getting people to understand how much those dollars mean to their communities. We are working with the United Way already. We will continue that. They are part of the stakeholder transition group as we move to this new model, so I can clearly commit to you that we will continue to be engaged with them. They are critical partners to us in this effort to modernize how we do this, and also to ensure a robust and ongoing successful combined federal campaign.
I think two very legitimate concerns is if we consolidate this at the national level, all of a sudden you're going to start potentially making federal decisions in terms of local charities, in terms of who can be included in the donations and that type of thing. So that's a concern. I think the other concern too is the upfront fee as opposed to a variable fee, so that potentially smaller charities just won't be able to necessarily participate in the program. Can you quick speak to those two issues?
Sure. Let me start with the fee question. We are working with a transition group, this stakeholder group that includes philanthropic organizations, on how to cover the costs of the campaign and what kind of fee to do that. One of the specific alternatives that is under consideration is a tiered set of fees, different fees for larger organizations and for smaller organizations. So I think that is definitely one of the alternatives on the table in terms of how we can make sure the fees are appropriate and consistent with the differing resources.
In addition to different tiers, could you have some variable and some fixed? I mean, would that be something you look at?
All of those things are in the cards. This process is continuing. There's a transition process and, as I said, an ongoing engagement. And as we work that through, I'm happy to come back and keep you apprised of our progress.
And then just quick comment on the federal control over which charities would be qualifying and or not qualifying.
The process today for participation in the combined federal campaign involves both local and federal oversight. We want to make sure that the charities that we are making available to federal employees are ones that are well run. That exists today. We also recognize that it is critical to have people through the combined federal campaign be able to communicate with and support the charities in their local community. That's been a hallmark of our success. It's going to be a core element of how we proceed going forward.
Thank you. Senator Carter. Senator Portman, I failed to follow the script before our first line of questioning. I'll give Senator Ernst a little chance to settle in here. So let me ask these first three questions. Is there anything you are aware of in your background that might present a conflict of interest with the duties of the office to which you have been nominated?
No.
Do you know of anything, personal or otherwise, that would in any way prevent you from fully and honorably discharging the responsibilities of the office to which you have been nominated?
I do not.
Do you agree without reservation to comply with any request or summons to appear and testify before any duly constituted committee of Congress if you are confirmed?
I do. You're welcome.
I need to correct the record, because the issue at stake here and raised by Senator Vitter is not whether or not members of Congress and their staff are going to be treated the same as every other federal employee. It's whether or not they're going to be required to follow the law and be treated like every other American. Under the Affordable Care Act, and Senator Vitter states it in his letter, it specifically was called out in the law that members of Congress and their staff had to purchase insurance in a plan, either one created under this act or offered through an exchange established under this act. So Congress explicitly said that members of Congress and their staff could not be treated like other federal employees who could continue to get their insurance as they always did. Now, because of that, millions of Americans lost their health care under Obamacare and were forced to purchase on the exchange. They don't get an employer contribution into the exchange. They get a subsidy if they're qualified based on income. And so Senator Grassley recognized that fact, that because members of Congress and their staff are now going to be forced to purchase a plan either created by the Act or under an exchange created by the Act, they were not going to be allowed to obtain the employer contribution. And so Senator Grassley, on March 24, 2010, offered an amendment that would have allowed that employer contribution to be paid into those plans that now members of Congress and their staff would have to purchase through the exchange. That amendment was explicitly defeated. My guess, Senator Carp, is you voted against that. So the issue at stake was, should we follow the law? Should members of Congress and their staff get special treatment? I think they shouldn't. I think we should be forced to follow the law. And it was OPM, under pressure from members of Congress and the administration, that circumvented the very clear language of the law. And that's what is at stake in terms of getting the information, in terms of how that all came about. What kind of, again, mental gymnastics were utilized to literally circumvent a very clearly written law? I'm no lawyer. It's very clear to me what Congress's intent was, and yet Congress's intent has not been carried out. So this has nothing to do with members of Congress and their staff being treated equally as other federal employees. This has everything to do with members of Congress and their staff being treated like every other American who lost their health care because of Obamacare. And they don't get an employer contribution, just members of Congress and their staff do. That's unfair, that's special treatment, and that's the issue, and that's the information I want to get out of OPM. That's what Senator Vitter wants to get out of OPM as well. Senator Black.